Hey guys, tonight we're diving into something more shocking than a medieval fashion show. The absolutely disgusting reality of medieval toothpaste. Yes, you heard that right. Forget your minty fresh fluoride and the luxurious feeling of a dentist's reassurance. I mean the kind of toothpaste that might make you gag, cringe and simultaneously spark up those nostalgic high school health class memories. So before you brush aside this opportunity, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you actually enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, drop a comment about where you're tuning in from. I'm always curious if someone is suffering through this at 3 AM from a cornfield in Iowa or a cozy flat in Paris. Now, let's dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soothing hum and find a comfy spot because it's about to get uniquely gross. Ever wondered how medieval folks cared for their pearly whites? Did they have a secret stash of gourmet herbal mouthwash? Were they flossing with actual twigs? What would you do if you had a cavity but your only option for relief was an angry barber with questionable tools? And now, congratulations. You've just woken up in 1398, probably looking for some sort of dental care. Good luck navigating this medieval mouthful of secrets. Medieval toothpaste wasn't just your run-of-the-mill mint. No, they used charcoal. Think of it as the original cleansing agent. Imagine trying to scrub your teeth with charred remnants of last week's fire. Not exactly refreshing, right? You might as well have been brushing with an actual log. In fact, it was more like hunting for a toothbrushing stick in the backyard of a barbecue party, and deciding, yes, I'll use the part that didn't catch fire. In the absence of mint-flavoured toothpaste tubes, they were left with the questionable charm of charcoal, the kind that looked great as a barbecue briquette, but left your mouth smelling like a campfire gone wrong. So how did this become the go-to for dental care? Well, the concept of dental hygiene was as foreign to medieval minds as an organic fruit smoothie is to a modern-day caveman. They thought, if something's black and looks like it could scrub my pots, it should do wonders for my smile. And while charcoal might clean surfaces, it didn't exactly charm the ladies during courtly dances. Think about it. You walk up to your crush and flash a smile, revealing a set of teeth blackened from a recent scrub with yesterday's ashes. Talk about rising to the occasion. The texture of medieval toothpaste was, let's say, rustic. Imagine grinding up pieces of charcoal into a fine powder, mixing it with a bit of water, and calling it your new oral care miracle. It's easy to picture medieval peasants puffing out their chests, proudly flaunting their toothpaste while mentally ranking their cleanliness on a scale of barely edible to what on earth is that smell? To top it off, the flavour profile wasn't much more sophisticated. If fresh mint was a 10, medieval toothpaste was 3 on a bad day, a bitter charcoal sludge that stuck to everything like a clingy X. Then there's the casual approach to dental appointments. Good luck finding a dentist willing to trade some charred bits for a proper cleaning session. The local barber surgeon, who doubled as your regular hairstylist, was not equipped to handle dental hygiene, unless you count 20 minutes spent chatting while swinging around sharpened tools you'd rather not visualise. He might advise you to refrain from eating anything until Christmas, for the sake of preserving your precious, albeit gritty hygiene efforts. Of course, our modern squeamishness regarding dental care isn't the only surprise. They believed that frequent scrubbing would lead to swift decay. Yes, I know, it makes no sense at all. Every scrubbing was a ritual disguised as an art form. Brush too often and your teeth will fall out, they doomfully predicted. What kind of teeth care philosophy is that? Instead of confidence, they handed out more paranoia than a medieval plague. And now picture the grand medieval banquets, deliciously elaborate, blatantly over the top, and riddled with sticky goodness. What do you think happened when people indulged in feasts filled with sugary treats of honey and sweets, sweets that modern dentists would fill out safeguards against, on a foundation of charcoal scrubbing? Spoiler alert, disease and decay were just around the corner, Guests could chew on their culinary delights, only to realise that brushing their teeth would hardly mitigate the impending doom looming over their pearly whites. Talk about being torn between the thrill of royalty and the horror of a decrepit dental game. But let's not leave our medieval friends without a hint of hope. Some clever souls took it upon themselves to explore alternatives, like crushed herbs, spices, even lemon peels. However, finding a suitable recipe was akin to discovering a four-leaf clover in a field of thorns. Not impossible, but obscured by the commonality of routines that spanned centuries. So, while some hoped for minty freshness, others were just left with dubious charcoal and a prayer. With this copious palette of ingredients, medieval toothpaste was less about truly cleaning your teeth and more about the struggle for social acceptance. Life was a balancing act. Is my smile passable, or should I just keep my mouth shut in most conversations? Looking back, it's quite hard not to chuckle at the absurdity of it all. Today, we might think cleaning our teeth is a prime reason to consider dental care an essential part of life, while back in the medieval ages it was more like a consensus of let's see what happens, punctuated by hopeless charcoal pasting enthusiasm that hardly made the cut. And now that you've been transported through the whimsical world of medieval oral hygiene, let's take a moment to appreciate the strides we've made. The next time you squeeze that minty toothpaste onto your brush, remember those brave souls trying to ward off decay with ashes and feel a deep sense of gratitude and humour for modern advancements. Because face it, tonight you've achieved a night of fresh breath and sparkling whites that no peasant of the past could ever even dream of. Imagine a time when people thought rubbing ash, crushed bones and lime could magically clean one's teeth. Yes, whispers of ancient Egyptian recipes reached medieval Europe and made their way into people's mouths. Literally. Nothing says oral hygiene like debris from an acropolis. Now, if you were one of the lucky few who had access to the magical wonders of ancient Egyptian dental advice, you might have thought you were on a path to greatness. But alas, folks, this was about as effective as brushing your teeth with a gravel driveway. Medieval folk had some serious misconceptions about cleanliness. You'd think they'd learned something from the Egyptians, but no. Instead, they revelled in a lifestyle where getting your toothy pegs chipped or cracked was just normal. People were convinced that swishing around some crushed bones would ward off decay. Let's pause and really think about that. Can you imagine brewing up a special toothpaste made from ground-up femur bones? It's not exactly in the minty freshness aisle, is it? While you're picturing that delightful concoction, let's remember how the power of suggestion can shape habits. If Grandma said that chewing on soot-covered bones would make your breath fresh, how could you argue? You'd mistake the smell of ash as the fragrance of cleanliness, blissfully ignorant of the lurid details emerging from your molars. And speaking of foul breath, medieval society was rather forgiving when it came to personal hygiene failures. Sure, everyone smelled like they spent months on a fishing boat, reeking of despair and hard labour, but nothing stunk quite like the oral devastation left unchecked by proper dental care. Bad breath became a social norm that waved goodbye to any awkwardness. You could share a goblet of ale with your neighbour while both of you had oral, its very own forgotten circus act. Medieval Europe's dental care could have resembled a freak show for spectators in a busy town square. Imagine the jester juggling bones, while the peasant next to you applied a clay paste to his smile, thinking to himself, surely this will work. Spoiler alert, it didn't, and it just made everyone's mouth feel like a compost pile. So where did this absurd fascination with bizarre ingredients come from? Ancient texts merged with medieval misinformation. A real recipe for disaster. Even Aristotle had a go at the notion, mentioning small teeth are better instead of prudently advising against the home remedies that would later haunt historical dental discussions. Thanks a lot, Aristotle. You'd think a philosopher would know better than to endorse questionable dental practices, and let's not forget how the elite classes intricately navigated these dental disasters. The wealthy among them sometimes dabbled with perfumes and powdered herbs to mask their bad breath, while the majority chiselled away at their dental disasters with less than ideal solutions. It was a classic case of nobles just masking the foul realities with an air of sophistication and a sprinkle of lie. Let's jump to the world of romantic encounters, in a time where a kiss could mean the merging of worlds, and teeth. Just think about those first smooches. Is that your breath, or just the smell of decay from yesterday's feast? It's a wonder these encounters ever led to marital bliss. Who knew that love in the time of medieval toothpaste was a battlefield, navigating between rotten teeth and foul breaths? With all that menthol-free mouth concoction brewing in their heads, medieval societies danced around the horrific truth of dental hygiene with macabre abandon. They even had a supernatural belief that their teeth could harbour evil spirits. So it's no wonder people opted to crush more bones believing they harnessed protection rather than rot. Just rub it more forcefully, that's how you banish demons. Classic medieval logic, right? To wrap it all up, let's tip our hats to the absurd perseverance of medieval hygiene warriors. They boldly ventured forth, armed with ash and bone, facing the world one rotting tooth at a time. Through all their misconceived methods, they approached their toothy dilemmas with a unique blend of courage and ignorance. Tooth decay might have been rampant and breath quite pungent, but those medieval folk sure knew how to entertain a dentist's nightmare. So here's to the twisted lineage of toothpaste through history, gross yet oddly charming. Lift a glass of ale to these fearless souls as you settle down with your minty fresh toothpaste, sanitised from bygone battles of bad breath and tooth decay. Because while they scrubbed with the remains of last week's barbecue, you can rest assured that you have a reason to smile, cavity-free. Cheers. They say a sweet tooth could lead to trouble, and they weren't kidding. In an era where sugar was considered a luxury, people were ready to rot their smiles away for the sake of flavour. Why use mint when you can cover your tooth decay with sticky honey? Talk about giving your dentist a heart attack. Just imagine living in a world where cake is less about celebration and more about your dental demise. A rich layer of frosting could just as easily be the icing on the cake as the start of your oral horror story. In medieval Europe, sugar was the ultimate status symbol, like owning a yacht today, or being on the friends list of the hottest influencer. The wealthier you were, the more likely you were to indulge in this sweet commodity imported from sugarcane plantations thrumming with life, much like a caffeinated squirrel. Meanwhile, common folk were left polishing their wooden teeth and grimacing with each bite of their gritty pottage, while the nobles waltzed around with sugar-laden desserts. What's fair about that? Let's talk about the ways sugar made its grand entrance into personal care routines. When you'd catch someone scrubbing their teeth with a honey-infused sponge, oiling rocks and wrapping their mug in fig leaves, that was often just the start. They believed honey wasn't just delicious, it was magical. It was the mythical elixir of life, the original everything will be okay balm for your quickly deteriorating smile. You might as well have been slathering your mouth with glue, because that's what it felt like after a few spoonfuls of honey speckled their molars. Those in the know concocted mixes that could only be described as the ultimate medieval dental flex. Combining honey with ground herbs and the twist of citrus would become the norm. Less a toothpaste and more a medieval garnish for your mouth. Sadly, these sweet creations didn't exactly come with a warning label, and nobody appeared to think about the origin stories of their dental hygiene. You wonder, did they ever think their teeth might resemble a stage for the next horror film? They were attending to dental neglect like gangsters at an all-you-can-eat buffet, all while disregarding the long-term effects of their choices. The peasant's toothpaste dilemma soon spiralled into sugar-related catastrophes that would keep dentistless celebrities the world over cackling. It's worth noting that sugar wasn't just a dessert. It became an inbound force, the great attraction for lice, bugs, and even rodents. You can almost picture an enthusiastic rat diving into a honey pot, probably yelling, "Drink me, you'll have a sugary after party." I mean, if they had social media back then, just Sweet Tooth would have gone viral. Let's not forget why sugar was all-consuming. It wasn't about indulging in nectar. No, people were desperate to mask their tooth decay. The reasoning went like this. Why suffer from stinking breath from rotten teeth when you can merely mask it with golden syrup? So in a sense, these ambitious sugar enthusiasts were turning their mouths into candy reservoirs. Perhaps it was their way of telling the world, look, I may be toothless, but I'm sweet. Not surprisingly, those who over-enthusiastically embraced this sweet trend often found their once-present dental regiment collapsing faster than a poorly timed medieval banter. One day they were smiling through honey-drenched laughter. The next day they were seated in a makeshift dentist chair constructed from old hay bales, wondering if their luck had run out. Holy relics couldn't help them now. All they could do was pray for divine intervention. Sounds familiar, right? As the toothaches became more frequent, medieval dentists, the real kind, mind you, would remind everyone that indulging in sugar was akin to signing a pact with the devil. However, they certainly didn't give up their addiction. This trivial pursuit could only end in disaster, proving once again that sweet put a price on your cleanliness, and that medieval dental health was never an option. Let's face it, medieval dental care was a sugar-coated train wreck waiting to happen. Each swish of honey echoing in teeth resulted in issues that could only be resolved through sheer medieval persistence. So, the next time you bite into a cupcake or have a fun-sized candy bar, thank your stars for modern dentistry and recall that once upon a time, the sweet stains didn't just lead to tardy smiles, but a toothless future fraught with affliction. Don't think of them as hygienists. You're more likely to encounter barber surgeons who relished a bit of blood. Picture getting a tooth pulled while they're giving you a fresh haircut, throwing in some relaxing chit-chat about medieval gossip. Dentistry and gossip. A winning combo. In medieval Europe, if you thought modern dental anxiety was bad, just wait until you found yourself in a creaky chair with nothing but a beer and a questionable sense of humour to keep you going. You might go in hoping for just a small filling, but could easily end up leaving without an entire jaw. 1 minute discussing the weather, the next minute, your pain is sidelined as the barber surgeon decides his next move, without anaesthesia of course. To set the scene, imagine a dimly lit shop with the smell of old, unrefrigerated meats lingering in the air, a far cry from your dentist's sterile kingdom of white. You approach the barber surgeon, whose blood-stained apron resembles a flag marking his territory, a territory filled with ground-up bones and a spatula for mixing concoctions that may or may not include the hair of the dog that bit you. Before you can even take in the scene, he flashes a smile that reveals his own dilapidated gums, a true confidence booster as you realise that this is the man running the dental ship. As the barber surgeon lighting up for gossip about the latest scandal at the local tavern, something about that one night's unfortunate admiration for the pig farmer's daughter, he prepares his tools. Ever wonder what a medieval dental kit looked like? Think rusty pliers and knives that could double as murder weapons. Dental drills were more like lawn care tools of torture than the precision instruments we have today. It's like ripping out weeds, but instead of flowers, it's your molars they're working on. You half expect him to toss in a just relax as if he's curling your hair, or pretending to take that difficult piece of meat off the spit. The funny thing is, while you're wrestling with visions of doom and decay, at least you won't be alone in this miserable journey. The barber surgeon's sharp banter often comes accompanied by a steady flow of other patients. They too are waiting to surrender their teeth for the sake of beauty or, heck, even agricultural pursuits, depending on how pretty you want your smile to be. Anyone will tell you it's safer to have a toothache flight than risk spending another moment with a raggedy fella bent on dabbing just a little more brandy at the extraction site. But relief didn't end with the pull. Those lucky enough to survive their appointment might receive what they assumed to be aftercare. You see, some barber surgeons swore that chewing on a mixture of herbs would restore their well-being. However, most just ended up chewing on tree bark, sap, or whatever random plant scraps they could find. A traditional toothpaste of sorts, minus all the luxuries of mint or flavours that don't taste like river rot. And while you recover from your dental disaster, be prepared for the inevitable side comments. Let's face it, no one held back. While you were likely writhing in pain and itching to get out of the dank room, your fellow villagers eager for gossip will have you as their conversational piece. Oh, poor John, his teeth looked worse than a pickled herring. Want to be the talk of the town? Simply pop into the barber surgeon's lair, embrace the sharp tools of yesteryear, and off you go. By the time you stagger back onto the cobblestones, your mouth will be less graced by elegance and more by the remnants of a medieval joke. Oh, you'll be an instant celebrity. If you think your day was bad, just visit old Thomas the Tooth Pirate. Word of mouth, quite literally. So, if you ever find yourself contemplating dreams of a medieval tooth fairy, or wondering if some of those enchanted potions could fancy up your grin, remember the barber surgeons. Their offices were like a circus of fate, where dental issues met the sharp end of a pliers and the horizon overlooked a drizzle of comedic despair. And there you are, now part of the oral hygiene saga that historians might regard as the wildest of tooth tales. Honestly, all you can do is laugh, while gently wincing, of course. There weren't any effective cavity-filling techniques, so if you had a hole in your tooth you might end up with some wool stuffed in it, or worse, a nice bit of tree sap. Talk about a DIY dental nightmare. It's akin to modern-day dental hacks gone horribly awry. Imagine sitting in a dimly lit hut, perhaps trying to squint through the darkness, while a barber surgeon attempts to poke and prod your toothache into submission with a sap-laden stick. Your jaw would be clenched like a medieval lock, hoping the wooden spoon he uses for a spatula won't suddenly become a weapon of self-dentistry. Now, as if that wasn't bad enough, consider the delightful alternatives. Wool was a popular filler. Yes, the very same material you thought could only be used for knitting awkward gifts for the camel market. It wasn't exactly pre-treated with antiseptics or sterilised to discourage infections. Nope. You would get some lovely unwashed wool from last year's shearing, shoved right in your tooth, perhaps with a fervent prayer that the wool would act like a sponge to absorb some undefined relief. Spoiler alert, it didn't work. All it did was trap more food, adding a delightful bouquet of decay that would send even the mightiest noses running for the hills. Beyond wool, you might have resorted to tree sap, which brings us back to the risk of becoming increasingly acquainted with the local bees. Imagine trying to balance your dentist's appointments with larvae walking the windy road of nature's entomological traps. These sticky, potentially mouth-wrecking substances didn't just make the situation worse, they could seal in the very rot that was devouring your pearly whites in the first place. And there you are, wondering if dental veneers might somehow make the whole ordeal vanish, while simultaneously wondering if you could hibernate until a proper toothpaste was invented. But wait, let's dive deeper into the history of dental horror. While you might be stuck trying to chisel out the remnants of tree sap or wool from that cavity, the rest of the medieval world is facing a solid tooth health crisis. With everyone chomping down on hard bread that could double as a potential weapon, it was just a matter of time before breakage scenario became a very real concern. All across the land, teeth, young and old alike, were chipping faster than the local quarry. A tooth might take one smack of 2-day-old rye bread to make a snap decision for you. And now, with a pitiful hole left behind, the barber surgeons are jumping at the chance for some inevitable action. "Let's just take it out," would become his motto as people squealed for mercy that echoed through the village. With nothing but a pair of rusty pliers and minimal understanding of compassion, you'd find yourself wondering, what constitutes worse pain, the toothache or the extraction? This was an age when the dentist didn't bother with anaesthetics. You could practically hear the nails being driven into the bags of both victims as medieval folk dramatically screamed while enduring life's greatest dental tragedies. Be still your heart, because what came after was no better. The leftovers of your fleeting dental hope were buried in rags or cloths, furthering the trauma after such a gruesome act. You couldn't replay those moments in your mind without picturing barbarians having more finesse than the town's dentist. "Modernity be damned," you'd shout before being silenced by reality. So instead, you'd pace back to your straw-filled hovel, gnawing on wooden sticks, spoiled fruits, and whatever else didn't require the heroic effort of chewing. And there you are, proudly announcing the new age of eating soft foods to your equally toothless companions. Sure, the apothecary might offer a nasty mix of powdered herbs and honey for your teeth, and that could stain your clothes and have you smelling like a wildflower garden. But you simply can't fathom the idea of scraping tree sap out of your mouth on a Sunday. As the sun sets on another toothless day in medieval life, remember this little tale of patching together your pearly whites with makeshift fillers. So as you lay your head down tonight, pondering over dental decisions that might encompass centuries of decay, a little gratitude goes a long way for the modern wonders of dentistry. One can only hope that while we are wrapped in the comfort of our toothpaste tubes tonight, our ancestors are still scratching their heads at the woolen, dental debates that once plagued their days. Ah, the irony. Because while they may have struggled with filth and decay at every turn, they certainly proved that human resilience has never tasted so sweet or sour. Forget fancy floss and minty strips. Medieval folk often ripped off some twigs and called it good. Picture idly chewing on a branch like a bewildered squirrel. You emerged from the experience feeling, well, perplexed at best. As you cautiously gnawed at these wooden slivers, you might have started to wonder, how on earth did anyone think this was a fair substitute for proper dental hygiene? Yet, twigs were the premium dental care of the day. Your bite of choice in an age before the minty miracles of 21st century mouth care. Imagine waking up each morning and surveying your oral landscape. Tooth decay was not just commonplace, it was practically a rite of passage. There you stood, ready for your daily woodland ritual, contemplating which branch would serve as your oral scrubbing buddy. Think about it. While today's dental aisles boast an extravagant array of flavours, from bubblegum to charcoal, medieval folk had a choice of the very cheery or the simply dead variety, depending on the twig type. Which would you prefer? Oak for a robust chew, or maybe birch for a subtler flavour? Both options are great, but you might just leave with splintered gums and a whole lot of unanswered questions. The sound of energetically gnawing on twigs was often accompanied by a unique ambience, a medley of laughter, snickers, and the occasional gagging noise. Picture a group of peasants huddling around a fire between chores, sniggering over dental advice as if it were a local gossip rag. "Have you tried the willow bark? Takes the crumbs right out of me teeth," they'd chuckle. You could just as easily be bickering over crop yields or swatting flies away from your meagre stew. Now let's discuss the broader implications of this eccentric dental routine. While you were busy chomping on trees, daily life became a tantalizing experiment. Each piece of tree bark you devoured left an aftertaste reminiscent of desperation. The prevailing theory might have gone something like this. Nature provides, right? So, chewing on twigs must offer a unique connection to Mother Earth, not to mention an annual chance to double as an impromptu woodpecker. Why bother handcrafting shiny floss when you could fashion nature's finest into your dental care? Take that willow twigs, for example. Along with their dental benefits, people enjoyed a short-lived philosophical debate. If I can chew on a twig and it's good for my teeth, what else can I find in the forest? Opportunistic foragers with questionable motives may have begun to wonder about mushrooms or crunchy insects. A medieval supermarket adventure? Talk about upselling. And do we need to mention the social gatherings that revolved around this wild dental craze? Twigs spark dental diplomacy. Picture you and your friends gathered around a fire in the fading daylight, discussing your conquests. Who found the best flossing stick, how it enhanced your daily chewing routine, and whether the neighbourhood owl secretly mocks your choice. As they ripped out the fibrous centre of each stick, a sense of camaraderie emerged, bonding over both dental destitution and laughter-laden existential crises. Flossing twigs became synonymous with shared experiences, keeping the medieval community together as they grimaced through their rotten teeth. Top it off with the absurdity of early morning rituals, waking up at the crack of dawn to forage for the perfect piece of wood as the sun barely cracked through the fog. Picture yourself trudging through the fields, navigating mud, and perhaps the occasional chicken droppings, all in search of the ideal branch. Ah, yes, the texture is just right. The excitement resembles that of a child opening presents on their birthday, except instead of toys, you end up with a dental splinter. And yet, what can we glean from this historical hilarity? The twigs may have appeared like an ambitious attempt at dental care, but those medieval attempts were intertwined with absurd realities. They remind us that modern dental floss, with its flavours and ergonomic design, is a true gift in a world of repurposed wooden messes. But before you toss away that eco-friendly floss at a local Whole Foods, give a softer pat on the back to your ancestors who believed that brushing your teeth with sticks was the path to both oral hygiene and sheer bliss, or at least an entertaining discussion topic at the village tavern. You have to wonder what it's like to live in a world where your dental routine resembles a nature documentary, painted with absurdity and a sprinkle of creativity. Murmurs of divine intervention resonated amongst peasants and nobles alike, who genuinely thought that avoiding brushing would lead to piety. Was it a virtue, or just a bad dental policy? Who needs hygiene when there's faith? In the Middle Ages, many truly believed that keeping their mouths dirty would somehow elevate their souls closer to the heavens. Picture them, peasant and prince, swollen gums and a mouthful of decay, held together by sheer belief in divine neglect. It's enough to make you believe God had a special sense of humour. So while you might align your toothbrush and toothpaste on the bathroom sink, the likely saviour of the medieval mouth was prayer. That's right. In the battle against cavities, these good souls opted for Hail Marys over hygienists. You could walk into any household and find them knee-deep in pious action, reciting prayers, while their breath could easily be weaponized in the next skirmish against local invaders. The daily ritual of invoking divine protection before meals was not just a routine, it was a desperate plea for relief from the horrors of oral hygiene. Let's talk about the decision-making process behind this formidable dental plan. Imagine a scene bustling with laughter and conversation, adorned with simple rustic charm, until someone, in a fit of enthusiasm, smiles wide, revealing a mouth full of disconcerting drusk. "Fear not," the man would say as he holds his jaw with desperation, "for my prayers are what make me clean." It's like saying, "I swear I'm on a diet," while standing over a cauldron of bubbling stew, but worse because it comes coupled with a distinctive whiff of something you'd normally shove back into an ancient well. And don't get me started on social gatherings. The drinking and dining could have been a romantic feast set against a backdrop of floral tapestries and flickering torches. Yet the underlying notes of yesterday's meals wafting from an open mouth had a profound effect. An aroma strong enough to send even the gallant knights fleeing. Who could blame them? You might be able to charge into battle with courage, but handle a toothless smile and carry that burden on your sword arm? It's challenging, my friend. At this rate, you think about drafting a fragrant battle flag, bleeding clay and rotting dreams, to celebrate your losses in casual company. Despite the unsightly nature of their dental decisions, this practice did serve a strategic purpose. With a breath that could flatten an onion, people became masters of social distancing long before it was fashionable. Personal space became synonymous with piety. Take a whiff of your neighbour's garlic-strewn breath, and suddenly you're feeling a little holier-than-thou about your own dental neglect. It fueled gossip and, quite frankly, cemented alliances. Just try to agree on who's been paying homage to dental aesthetics. Of course, there were those brave enough to attempt hygiene methods. Imagine rustic homes where a potential oral health enthusiast might find basil, peppermint or salt water. Ooh, how revolutionary. Chewing herbs in meals or swishing salt water might have felt like an exercise in futility, but for them it was a heartfelt inclination toward the art of oral warfare. They thought they were fighting decay when, in reality, they were merely masking the impending doom of disgust. Nevertheless, as pious folks chatted about tooth decay like it was the latest gossip, it became clear cleanliness was more about the heart than the mouth. As morals skidded along a rusty path of disbelief, they began making peace with their lack of appearance, content in their faith that perhaps God had bigger fish to fry. After all, who first approves of a kiss from a local merchant fresh off the pickle cart? They would have thumbed their noses at genteel hygiene practices, making declarations under grins that showcased the very essence of neglect, church bells chiming tiredly above. In the end, this was a time married to imperfections. Where plagues hung overhead like dark clouds, a face full of decay was merely a slap on the wrist compared to the threat of life's uncertainties. So, as you drift off to sleep tonight, take a moment to appreciate your toothpaste tube, toothbrush and dental floss. You may not believe it, but thanks to centuries' struggle, you now sit at the throne of cleanliness. Go ahead, revel in your minty fresh mouthwash. Let it be your blissful reverence. Here's raising a glass and minty breath to our ancestors who bravely rode the waves of surprisingly wretched but humorous devotion to oral care. Let's get real. Having lice in your hair was one thing, but how about having that plus rotting teeth? Imagine trying to keep your head up high while knowing your mouth looked like it might start an independent investigation. Can't have a lice-ridden life and a toothache without anxiety. And when you think about it, what's worse? The embarrassment of scratching your scalp in public or having to discuss that persistent toothache with your neighbour Agnes while standing in line for the public latrine. Truly, it was a challenge. As you're trying to juggle your social life with the impending doom of dental misery, let's take a moment to delve deeper into the world of medieval hygiene, or rather, the lack thereof. During this era, a lice infestation was practically a rite of passage, and the dread of tooth decay was as common as the plague. If your scalp wasn't itching like a rabid squirrel had made its home there, your teeth were probably rotting like an old root vegetable left behind after harvest. Picture this. You're sitting in the bustling market, weaving through the chatter of barter and barterers. You try to keep your hair tightly bound and ignore that insistent itch. Good luck with that. Your neighbour leans in, eyeing your mouth as though it holds the secrets of the universe, trying to subtly navigate the conversation around your ever-increasing dental dilemma. You've got quite the unique smile, they might say, mopping up the last of their ale while trying not to gag at your dental homage to decay. It's like a public job interview that's gone terribly wrong. No resumes, just bad breath. What's even more ridiculous is the fact that bad breath wasn't just socially awkward. It could signal a strategic disaster in the competition for mates. Imagine trying to woo the loveliest maiden in your village, but you can't quite muster the courage because you're fearing the negotiation of that conversation. Will you love me even though my gums look like they've been through a battle of their own? Good luck being romantic when the aroma wafting from your mouth could repulse even the boldest warrior. In a world where dental care was as non-existent as personal privacy, thanks to your entire family and possibly some neighbours sharing the same hovel, you were left with some unsavoury options that might make modern toothpaste users cringe. How about keeping nearby twigs handy? Yes, that's right. Some folks would bite into a twig and gnaw at it as if it were a gourmet dish, crafting their very own version of a toothbrush made from whatever they found on the forest floor. Was it effective? Well, some may say it was like trying to clean your windows with a potato and claiming victory. You may make some progress, but you're still left with streaks. And it doesn't take a medieval scholar to realise that their dental conditions contributed to their overall state of health. Imagine a world where your teeth are one of the first indicators that you're gasping for help. If your pearly whites looked like they'd seen better days, the likelihood was high that other issues were also brewing within, just waiting to launch a full-scale attack on your immune system. It's not just an unpleasant toothache. It's like playing Russian roulette with your health. Then there are the implications of having lice, those unwelcome guests that would invade your head and bring along their extended family for a wild party. With daily life buzzing with activity, it could feel like there was a whole ecosystem living atop your scalp. Medieval wisdom, as flawed as it was, suggested spells, herbal concoctions, and even soap that made you feel cleaner only after washing with it. If you could find some, that is. The comfort of louse-filled locks could either awe or disgust whoever dared to glance your way. So while brushing your teeth with whatever you could find and trying to ignore the sensation of something crawling through your hair, you might entertain fleeting thoughts of grandeur that spark poetic aspirations. Maybe your unfortunate dental situation could land you in a ballad sung by the bard at the tavern. Oh, the brave knight with rotten teeth who twirled his beloved in glee. Because what else do you do when you realise your dental hygiene challenges could inspire your own legend? Alas, as noble and hilarious as it might sound, you are still left dodging twigs and managing both lice and decay until the end of your medieval grind, never quite knowing which would claim you first. In conclusion, imagine living in an era where dentally related social faux pas reigned supreme. Lice and decay were the talons scratching at the door of any semblance of dignity, while you stepped through the challenges of daily medieval living. Every mouthful of nostalgia only added to the castle of chaos that quite frankly wasn't worth the trouble. So, the next time you brush your teeth with ease, give a tip of the hat to those medieval souls slogging through lice-infested, toothless tomfoolery. After all, history may have been gross, but quite frankly, it brought some wry humour to humanity. What's that sound? Oh, just a group of peasants bellowing about their tooth pain. When toothaches hit, medieval remedies range from wearing a piece of rotten meat around your neck to struggling through chants aimed at warding off the pain. You can't make this stuff up. In fact, imagine being part of that raucous gathering, the air thick with an aroma that suggests the meat has seen better days, like, oh, last week. With every hollow wail, you can almost hear the local barber surgeon preparing to deliver the remedy. Who wouldn't want a smile like that maintained by a guy who also sells you a haircut? Now, picture yourself living in the 14th century and deciding that a toothache is just nature's way of calling you to join a neighbourhood get-together. You plod toward the village square, rubbing your jaw as if trying to massage out the agony. Of course, your neighbour, Gertie, thinks she's the queen of folk remedies. "Oh, have you tried chanting? Oh, you river of pain! Go wash your woes away!" While standing on one leg, she implores, her own crooked smile revealing a delightful array of missing teeth. Gertie's cures would either send the toothache packing or revive a new strain of the plague. But who needs science when village gossip promises an instant solution? If chanting isn't your style, and honestly, who could blame you? You might opt for the time-honoured tradition of wearing, drumroll please, a piece of rotten meat around your neck. Presumably, the theory was that the odour would either distract from your toothache or repel your enemies entirely. Either way, you'd get plenty of attention. Is that a toothache, or is Gerald just harbouring a weekend barbecue gone wrong? It inspired both sympathy and a hint of envy for the poor guy known as the Meat Man. Your peers could laugh, but so long as you don't have to chew, you're winning at life. But wait, there's more. Medieval law suggests that for a really bad tooth, how about this? You could simply have a friendly neighbourhood dentist use a rusty pair of pliers. All the rage, just tell him to give it your best shot. Let's not overlook the finesse of wrestling with the options of pulling teeth. Will it come out whole? Will you lose half your jaw in the process? Or will you fight a tooth and nail battle that leads to eternal regrets? Life was wild back then. It was like a game of Russian roulette, but with a higher stake. Your dignity. As you lament your fate, fellow villagers gather round, swapping tales of their individual struggles with their own dental disasters. "I once lost a tooth to a hen's beak," shouts one enthusiastic villager, prompting a chorus of laughter from the crowd that sounds not unlike a celestial choir, warming up for their rendition of heavenly pain relief. And then there was the time I miscalculated the strength of my bread. Teeth went flying. This could easily turn into a performance, social comedy, looming over the crowd where everyone joins in about their rotten experiences. And for those moments of panic when one gets feverish from the pain, what could be better than a good old saltwater rinse? You'll feel renewed, like a knight ready for battle, sort of. But let's be honest, gargling saltwater was just a medieval version of Don't Think About It. It was the long-lost relative of modern mouthwash, and who doesn't love stinging a bit for relief? Just imagine clenching your jaw and creating the most forward-thinking mouthwash advertising of the medieval era. Come taste the salt and the pain of family curses. It'll remind you who to never borrow bread from again. However adventurous you were with your remedies, there was one thing you couldn't escape. The hopelessness of watching those around you attempt unconventional methods. You've heard enough cautionary tales to realise that toothaches were not merely dull thuds of discomfort, but full-fledged narratives of horror. Dressing so soggy you could almost invent a new soup. Yes, tooth pain was more than a wait for relief. It was a whole new merit badge for overcoming the absurdities of life in medieval times. So there you stand among your peers, meat dangling from your neck, salt water swirling in your mouth, ready to join them in laughter and chatter. Toothache cures? Who needs them when you've got a community coming together through the absurd trials of hearty health? Combine that with the looming dread of your next tooth extraction, and you'll find the medieval approach to dental care was painfully amusing, uncomfortable, and downright ridiculous. Tooth pain brought people together, forged buzzing conversations, and spun tales that wouldn't be out of place in a modern sitcom. Toothaches. Life's way of reminding you that laughter may just be the best medicine after all. Want to find your soulmate in the 14th century? Well, hope they like the smell of decay. When bad breath was pervasive and tooth rot was the standard, a romantic kiss could mean risking it all, including your potential future love. Picture this. It's an enchanting evening at the local tavern. Flickering candlelight dances across the faces of hopeful suitors, and the scent of stew wafts seductively from the chimneys. You lock eyes with a charming stranger across the room, ready to sweep them off their feet, or at least attempt to do so without unleashing the full force of that questionable breath upon their unsuspecting nostrils. In medieval Europe, where dental hygiene was an afterthought, a romantic encounter was an exercise in bravery as much as intimacy. Breath fresher than a summer breeze was about as common as spotting a unicorn grazing in the village square. Instead, it was more likely that your date had the aroma of aged cheese, and perhaps a hint of something unidentifiable, possibly last week's fish stew lingering on their gums. To engage in a kiss with your potential partner was akin to gambling. Would you walk away heartbroken, or simply gagged, teeth chattering in horror at what you just experienced? When it came to courting, your game needed to be strong, and forget about floss. The best you could do was a branch or two to gnaw on to get rid of the offending plaque. But just picture the awkwardness if your date caught sight of that twiggly toothpick dangling by your lip. Talk about a romantic mood killer. Who knew that flirting with a twig would be the medieval version of making the first move? The social implications of bad dental care extended well beyond mere hygiene. It had real stakes when it came to courtship. You see, back then, a mouthful of rotten teeth was less about personal appearance and more about class. While the wealthy had access to honey and archaic attempts at toothpaste, more on that later, the average peasant was relegated to grimy oats and a prayer that their teeth might somehow hold up against the relentless forces of decay. The idea of impressing a noble with your jagged smile was as ludicrous as suggesting they wear last year's fashions. Our medieval friend who worked a sugar plantation, because why not, could indulge in occasional treats, leading to the irony that nobility rotted away their teeth at a significantly higher speed. Ever thought of dating royalty? Imagine presenting yourself to a bejeweled lord or lady with a 5-carat smile only to discover their mouth was the final resting place of a medieval dental horror show, complete with traces of yesterday's ale and a whopping cavity count that would make a dentist weep. Romantic prospects indeed, but here's where it gets really absurd. The medieval courtship rituals included elaborate formal dances where suitors would twirl and sway, all the while trying to position themselves so their breath stayed out of the path of their partner's nose. Dancers would often keep their mouths firmly closed, perhaps not for fear of stepping on toes, but instead to avoid the very real risk of unleashing the noxious fumes festering within. And if you think that's bad, wait until you think about lunch. Yes, that slice of ale toast paired with last week's gruel is now made manifest in their breath, as delightful as chewing on a sweaty sock. Ah, but desperation knows no bounds. Enter the indoctrination of herbal remedies as affectionate defenders of the awful odours. Noble women would often carry around sachets filled with lavender, rosemary and other fragrant herbs to mask their own halitosis and ensure a refreshing ambience. Imagine the chivalry surrounding that first kiss while your beloved quietly clutches their sweet-smelling pouch, fumbling to get it between their hands and you. Oh, darling, I love you. Sniff, sniff. Wish I'd brought perfume. While we modern folk can treat gum issues with minty strips found in every corner store, the medieval dilemma was vastly different. You were either destined for toothless old age or exposure to the abundant charms of the local herbalist, who knew all the right medicinal combinations to ward off waterborne diseases, assuming your relationship survived the first kiss, of course. So, ponder this. The next time you're griping about waiting in line at the dentist, reflect on those brave souls in the 14th century, where a single kiss could open a doorway to romance. or end in a gag reflex reminiscent of that not-so-blissful breakfast. Just another average day in the delightful world of medieval smooching, a tale of love, decay, and audacious romance. In medieval life, where mouldy bread was on every table, it's no wonder that oral hygiene took a back seat. The dilemma was whether to eat the bread or deal with your dental disaster. Spoiler alert, they probably went with the bread. Imagine biting into a loaf that looks like it survived the Black Plague, only to taste a blend of stale crust and even staler regrets. In a world without preservatives, your daily bread was often a thriving ecosystem of mould, critters, and enough bacteria to start a more entertaining reality show than anything on television today. Take a moment to visualise. Crusty loaves lined up on the table like soldiers going off to war. Each slice was a gamble. It could enrage your taste buds or protect you from scurvy, simply by not forewarning your dinner date that you just consumed a slice out of the family's mould collector. You might think, mould is bad for you, but medieval humans were masters of ignorance. If the bread was still somewhat doughy and could be turned into pottage, why wait for herbalists to declare it an affront to their health? And speaking of health, dentition was a real buzzkill. In a time when the average life expectancy hovered around 30, which in medieval terms is like being revived as a pop star in your late 80s glory, there wasn't much time to worry about teeth. You accepted the decay as a part of life because the other option, staring at that mouldy loaf, was far worse. Call it a survival of the delicious approach to life. You scarfed down your condensed carbs without a second thought. Let's dive deep into just how bad this bread situation was. Most peasants found their bread was made with rye or barley, which is, let's face it, not as appealing as those exotic baguettes we fawn over today. In fact, not only was their bread about as appetizing as a cardboard box, but it was most often speckled with things intended for livestock. Every bite of mouldy bread came with the delightful crunch of mystery ingredients, sawdust, insects, or even random bits of straw. Fancy living, right? Little wonder everyone was in a bad mood. What do you expect from a population too busy battling their loaves instead of battling their ailments? Now, combine all this with the persistent problem of tooth decay. It's next-level torture to suffer the throbbing agony of a cavity while munching on mystery bread. You had more holes in your teeth than the bread had bugs, which was saying something. Toothaches were as common as horrible puns at medieval jesting tournaments. People wandered around cradling their cheeks like they were the crown jewels in a castle. "How's your tooth?" "Oh, it's fine," they'd respond while internally screaming, "I'm one bite away from viral misery." Even worse, tooth loss was merely the beginning. Once you lost a few molars, you still had to chew your food and find ways to suffer through meals without looking like a slack-jawed caricature at a market. You might catch a glimpse of that nobleman down the street with a mouthful of gold. We're talking a dental campaign that would win the hearts and laughs of any fair maiden. At the same time, you're over here trying out medieval dental hacks like stolidly chewing on twigs for dental health. Sure, buddy, let me know how that goes. Compounding the tragedy was the absence of any real dental treatment. The local barber surgeon could fix almost anything with sharp objects, but tooth extractions weren't your casual Friday appointment. Think, take a shot of whiskey and say a prayer. Toothaches were not just shrugged off, they catalysed social gatherings, leading neighbours to share horror stories of extractions and the bizarre concoctions they concocted just to alleviate the pain. And what of brushing, you ask? With all that mouldy bread and the murmurs of discontent, do you think folks thought twice about dental care? Toothbrush, what's that? A twig, perhaps? Call it the world's worst dental care plan. "I'll just chew on my problems and hope they disappear," they mused nonchalantly, while attempting to maintain conversations through gritted teeth. So what do we learn from this bread-induced dental disaster? Life was indeed one crummy experience after another, and ignore dental hygiene at your own peril. Next time you bite into a soft, delicious slice of bread, give a little nod to those medieval peasant warriors who knew all about horrifyingly bad oral hygiene, driven by a fermented loaf of fate. Because behind every gnashing of a medieval smile was a tale of syrupy sweet irony, and potentially a mouthful of rot. Surprising as it is, there were herbal remedies that nearly made things taste better, at least temporarily. Imagine chewing on rosemary in a failed attempt to banish tooth decay. It's the medieval version of breath mints, with a divine twist. In an era where fresh mint was a luxury like any other, the desperation for a sweet scent covered up the horrifying reality that most people just didn't know better. So, instead of spritzing after every meal, medieval folk were left with an array of herbs that turned into their poor man's mouthwash. Picture this. You sit around the dinner table, surrounded by a robustly seasoned stew that smells vaguely of something not quite identifiable. As everyone raises their clay bowls to their lips, you realise that the only thing worse than the dinner is the post-meal breath that will soon follow. Fear not, you think to yourself, plucking a sprig of rosemary straight from the garden outside. With a hopeful shrug, you pop it in your mouth and masticate like a confused goat. Sure, it may taste like a mildly bitter Christmas, but at least it smells better than that suspicious combination of breath and stewed cabbage. Who needs crest, right? But this reliance on herbal remedies wasn't limited to rosemary. Medieval enthusiasts had a virtual spice rack of oddities at their disposal. Culinary marvels like sage, thyme and mint were among the herbs deemed worthy enough to grace their remodelled dental routines. In fact, folks believed that these pungent little plants had magical properties, able to ward off illness, bad spirits, and perhaps even a bad tooth or two. Why visit a dentist when you have a little garden of miracles right outside your door? And let us not forget the pungent power of garlic. Garlic was considered so adorable in medieval practices that it was even thought to repel vampires, and, perhaps more urgently, neighbours trying to chat with you about last night's pottage. The strong aroma wafting from your mouth could have served as a warning sign to anyone within 10 feet, and also as your license to avoid them. "Sorry, dear, can't talk. My breath is too robust for company," you'd say with a smile. Little did they know you were actually just trying to mask your dental plight, while your teeth crumbled away with every bite of bread. While these herbs offered a temporary reprieve, they came with a significant catch. They provided about as much relief from tooth decay as yelling at your teeth would. Chewing on sage or rosemary might have masked the odour of your decaying molars, but deep down that cavity was still plotting its gruesome attack. It's like using an air freshener when your sink is backing up. It might cover the scent, but good luck with the plumbing. As if that weren't bizarre enough, there are some historical accounts suggesting that crushed herbs were mixed with sweet wines or vinegars for a truly medieval mouthwash concoction. Wanting a pleasant aroma at the medieval gala, they'd swish this mixture around, feeling a bit glamorous while simultaneously praying it might save their molars. But with every sip you could almost hear the dental emergencies lining up to visit your local barber surgeon. The truth, however, was that medieval people's understanding of oral hygiene was utterly rudimentary. Many believed that diseases, especially those affecting the mouth, were brought on by bad air or evil spirits. So, what better way to ward off infections than to pack your mouth with whatever herbs you could find? At this point, putting all your trust in the kitchen garden was like flipping a coin. Heads, broken molars, tails, slightly better breath. And let's be honest, the irony of it all was staggering. While you're sprucing up your breath with thyme, your neighbour was snugly tucked in their hovel, gnawing on a hunk of mouldy bread and wondering why their teeth looked like they'd been to war. You'd emerge, feeling fresh but failing to check up on your smile, only to have a dire realisation on your next payday. the barber surgeon has you on speed dial for his infamous tooth extraction party. In the end, while medieval herbal remedies provided a hint of aromatic comfort, they left much to be desired in terms of actual dental hygiene. So as you settle down tonight, let's pour one out for the medievals who bravely chewed on twigs and leaves, hoping against hope that someday a minty toothpaste would emerge to save them from the horrors of their decaying smiles. And as you do, remember to count your blessings, like that shiny tube of toothpaste waiting for you in the bathroom. You've come a long way from those herbal hodgepodges, and it's a glorious revolution for your teeth. Why bother with mouthwash when you could splash some holy water on your teeth? You might inadvertently go from holy to hopeless with that method. After all, divine intervention can come at a cost. Picture yourself at a medieval church service, the air thick with incense and the eager anticipation of misinformed dental hygiene. The parishioners, dressed in woolen tunics with hems dragging in the mud, are keen to embrace whatever miracle might come from that flick of holy water, right down to the gums. An elderly priest stands nearby, swinging a heavy silver chalice filled with the finest unblessed water, hoping it might suppress those pesky dental bacteria. Spoiler alert, it won't. The congregation, embracing its oral miracle, is convinced that simply dousing their teeth would fend off tooth decay. This ignitable hope also doubles as a fantastic excuse to skip real dental care. What's a bit of rot when you have divine providence? It's like brushing your teeth with an expired coupon to salvation, but hey, at least it's something. However, no one is exactly reading the fine print on the divine dental contract. The people are labouring under the assumption that bad breath and cavities can be washed away with a sprinkle from the priest's cup, perhaps even if it happened last June. You've got to wonder how many parishioners were bravely visiting the confessional after a few unfortunate lunch choices and hoping the holy water might magically prevent their cheeseburger of damnation. It's a gamble worthy of a medieval card shark just itching to bleach off sin. And toothbrushes. Meanwhile, far from the church, there's a peasant named Ted who decides that washing his mouth out with holy water is just what he needs after a dinner of stale bread and fermented beans. He tilts the vial, pours the liquid wildly, thinking it's his ticket to heavenly breath. Surely, he muses, God will grant me clean teeth if I ask nicely enough. Spoiler alert, that's never how it works, Ted. Immediately he notices the water smells oddly of the nearby hamlet's pig farm too. A divine dental treatment and an olfactory assault. Welcome to medieval multitasking. And speaking of multitasking, some devout souls took it a step further. Why stop at just your pearly whites? You might have seen priests in prayer after a brusque, holy mouthwash. Party post-service, enthusiastically suggesting cleansing the entire mouth before the eternal damnation that a toothache might lead to. Our Father who art in heaven, please attend to my tender gums. It really was a heavenly dance of desperation. The problem? As marvellous as the intentions were, they did little against the real horrors lurking in medieval diets. Spicy garlic stew was not on the menu for their breath, nor were carrots or apples considered divine polishing agents. The only thing likely to linger was the memory of their last soapbox sermon on purity, the irony of spiritual cleansing, while their actual cleaning skills were, shall we say, less than divine. Meanwhile, in castles and manors, the higher-ups scoffed at the thought of holy water and turned to acidic wines instead. Who could blame them? It was a vintage blend that had everyone believing they had stumbled upon the Bushmills of the ages. Forget a refreshing sip of herbal tea, chug down some wine for the ultimate prestige, and failing to care for oral hygiene seemed like a noble tragedy. So, where does this leave our tooth troubles? Imagine the tooth decay survey in 1392, where charmingly crooked smiles were seen as normal. That's medieval society for you. Who needed toothpaste when you were dodging divine judgment with a splash of water blessed by someone's grandma? The quest for a dental miracle continues, medieval style. In the long run, holy water was no substitute for toothbrushes, toothpaste, or even rudimentary floss, but at least it gave some people a false sense of security amidst the grim realities of medieval life. So, whether it was sloshing around with holy water or lovingly embracing a thick mulled wine, the goals were the same: to escape a painful reality one tooth at a time. Cheers to that. You think midnight snacks are bad? Try dealing with a midnight tooth cleaning in the 14th century when vermin might be nearby. The brushing turned into an existential crisis of whether your teeth were worth the horror show. Picture this. You stir awake in the dark, a flickering candle splashing shadows across your hovel, wondering if the horrid taste of yesterday's garlic stew still lingers on your teeth. Armed with nothing but a gnawed twig, you contemplate the wisdom of your late-night tooth-cleansing ritual. As if making a bad decision wasn't daunting enough, the potential for an unexpected rodent guest only heightens the tension. But your nightly brushing comes with its own set of absurd challenges. First, you're dealing with the obstruction of darkness. That easily misidentified bump in the corner could be a forlorn rat or your neighbour's missing shoe. And who needs a dental mirror when your dimly lit space is cluttered as if a tumbleweed rolled through after a party? Best case scenario, you're swatting away pests while scrubbing your teeth, and worst case, you're rambling in despair over a furry spectator that's just gone to town on your crumbs. Now, let's talk about the mighty twig that stands in for your toothbrush. In medieval times, the wooden stick of choice was generally a thin branch from a tree, often chewed on one end until it resembled a sad little scrubber. You think flossing is tedious? You'd be lucky if your stick didn't splinter before you finish the journey through your mouth. Imagine the satisfaction of attaining an S shape when it gets jammed between those delightful gaps in your molars, all while wishing there was a local dentist who could fix your dental issues in minutes, not months. But hey, who needs a dentist when you can have the magical power of herbs and gruel? With every scrape of that twig, the question lingers in the back of your mind: is this really helping? Or am I just at war with imaginary germs? If only you had a diet that didn't consist of gruel and damp bread, perhaps your teeth wouldn't be longing for a tender care routine. Alas, the closest thing you have to toothpaste is the mysterious powder your grandmother called magic dust, which suspiciously mirrors the contents of last week's potpourri. During your nightly ritual, the real fun is what happens next. You tuck your twig into a surface that's unyielding, perhaps the bread that's been getting hard as a rock on the counter. Now your midnight snack is no longer about satisfying hunger, but hoping you can outrun decay. What's on your menu for tomorrow? A light rigid cracker, or the last remnants of your cousin's questionable stew? Either way, it's all a fine dance in which your teeth are the reluctant lead actors. But the greatest irony lies in the endeavour. As you brush your teeth, is it an act of self-care, or simply a futile exercise in panic? Your breath still resembles that of a swamp beast, and all you've achieved is the tightening of a few threads in that shoddy wool turnip costume you wear daily. You pause mid-scrub, contemplating your existence in a world where nightly tooth cleaning seems pointless, where baking bread or fighting off rats takes priority over the well-being of one's smile. No one is there to critique you, except maybe the family dog who snuggled the farthest corner of the room, judging you in that whimsical way only dogs can. But deeper down, the horrifying truth materializes. Do these nightly rituals really aid in a comparison to the elaborate oral care practices we take for granted today? Because at the end of this late-night escapade, the shout of "Gardilou" announcing your daily refuse toss deserves as much attention. What's the point of brushing if half of medieval hygiene is throwing unmentionables into the street anyway? So, you finish brushing your teeth, waving goodbye to 5 minutes of what was perhaps the most harrowing ritual of your day. In the absence of rinsing mouthwash, you sit back in your nightly sanctuary, a tiny realm marked by some dubious dental practices and an unwavering commitment to make it through the night. Whether you'll wake up to a mouthful of bliss or the extreme necessity to chew twigs again is a gamble, not unlike seeing how far the local rat can jump across a bed of hay. What a time to be alive! Imagine a medieval court with peasants vying for attention while wincing at their tooth problems. It was a brutal combo of power struggles and chronic tooth decay, garnering quite the historical spectacle. Picture this: a gathering of lords and ladies, a grand wooden table filled with sumptuous feasts you can't even afford a crumb of, and in the middle of it all, there you are, sitting awkwardly on a hard wooden stool while nursing a painful toothache that feels like a castle siege in your mouth. You'd try to maintain a composure befitting the nobility, but instead, you can only focus on the throbbing pain that demands your full attention, making you wish you had never skipped out on dental care, because what good is a hearty steak when your only option is chewing with your front teeth like a sad horse? Now let's be real. Medieval courts were anything but dull. The lords and ladies would flaunt their finery and trade barbs during banquets, all with charming smiles that might conceal the horror of what their dental affairs truly entailed. Take a quick glance around, and you'd see the occasional lord dodging the gossip of a toothache, with a forced grin, trying to maintain dignity whilst wondering if anyone would notice the rot. Spoiler alert, they probably would. And as discussions turned from alliances to jest and laughter, every poorly timed chuckle could send shivers of regret down a table full of toothaches, especially if a tooth decided to make a spectacle of itself during feasting. Meanwhile, the barbers and healing men holding their barber poles, that notorious symbol of medieval dentistry, often found themselves called to court not just for haircuts, but for the ever-present issues of decaying teeth. One might have expected that the most prominent court physicians would recline in the lap of luxury, but no, they were just as likely to be found in the working-class sections of the castle, yanking out troubling teeth with little more than a grim smile and no anaesthesia. So, let's have a look. You're fine unless you flinch, they would proclaim, as if to echo the sentiments of power, bravery over comfort. Now imagine the spectacle as the attending barbers surge forth to treat the rank of nobles and peasants alike under the same roof. You'd have peasants nervously crossing their fingers as they held on to their reeking condition, while also attempting to pay lip service to the courtly matters of the day, even with their breath rivaling the scent of a fermented potato. There's no question, being without teeth meant your social standing might dip below that of the rats scuttling under the hallows, and yet you'd wave your mouth around trying to find someone, anyone, who might be afflicted more than you. And speaking of rats, let's not steer clear of what medieval sanitation looked like back then, which is probably something you'd rather not see. It was delightful to realise that the court not only attracted nobles with big hats and bigger attitudes, but attracted rodents keen on scuttling about in search of crumbs. And just when you thought one might sneak into your meal, you felt the oddly familiar pulsing of a dull toothache swelling at a most inconvenient moment. Picture trying to explain to a noble that the reason you can't sign over your land to them at that very moment is that your tooth has quite literally gone rogue. It's a true testament to the human spirit that they didn't just crumple into despair. Instead, they wore their toothaches as badges of honour. At some point during the negotiations, one could almost hear the argument transitioned into a wry little joke about tooth decay. Look, if I win this dispute, I'll treat you to some sort of lovely herbal concoction that will surely do better for your teeth than this pudding we're gnawing on. It was comedy amid chaos, where amidst all the rot you still dared to laugh weakly at the poor quality of dental existence. And then, of course, there was the aftermath of these glorious medieval banquets, when one would head home still nursing that pulsing ache, overwhelmed with a capital of regrets. Next time, maybe I shouldn't eat while judging my neighbour's questionable hygiene. Yet even with medieval life's persistent discomforts, the spectacle of court life persisted. Toothaches be damned. What can we say? The laughter might have been fleeting, but the tooth pain echoed long after, leaving historical figures to remember not only their victories, but their decayed dental fortune in court. It's like some sort of cosmic dental lottery where the consequences became the real winners. Decorated halls with crispy breadcrumbs, chilly wine and aching jaws made for quite the show, and it's a good lesson for any time traveller today. Respect your teeth, because those moments in medieval courts, not to be missed, not one toothache at a time. Modern dentists would be horrified at the notion of medieval dental care. Imagine a travelling barber surgeon bringing chaos to your mouth, as if surgery weren't terrifying enough. The jokes about bad breath didn't help. In the Middle Ages, professional barbers also moonlighted as surgeons, because nothing can say "trust me" quite like someone who's just trimmed your hair while eyeballing your cavities. Armed with nothing but a rusty hook, a bottle of questionable ale, and an attitude that screamed, "Let's wing it," these roving practitioners would announce their arrival in villages with all the subtlety of a medieval rock concert. Picture a mustachioed fellow shouting, "Who needs fancy dentist chairs when you can sit on a stool in my tent while I pull your teeth during my lunch break?" Once you spotted that travelling barber surgeon, your options were pretty limited. You could endure the pain, or avoid it, and hope for the best. Quite the dilemma. First, there's the needleless anaesthesia method, which involved something akin to prayer and sheer willpower. You would sit in an unsteady wooden chair in a cordoned-off area, while the barber smiled reassuringly and asked if you had paid your taxes lately. "Don't worry," he'd say. "I'll be gentle like I am while cutting hair." Spoiler alert, that was a lie. Now, if your tooth was particularly wretched, he might suggest the option of a full extraction. In this case, you would be advised to bite down on something, a leather strap, your own fist, or if you were particularly unlucky, your neighbour's knee. Bite down, don't scream, and hey, what's the worst that can happen? A delightful piece of advice that has undoubtedly stood the test of time. But wait, there's more. These surgeons didn't just make a quick, savage cut and move on. No, they had a reputation to uphold. You could lie back and welcome either the excruciating tugging sensation or the somewhat less terrifying, but equally bizarre method of tooth fixing with twigs? Yes, you heard that right. If a tooth was just a little wonky and didn't want to leave its cosy home, they'd sometimes shove twigs in your mouth for alignment. It's like trying to replace a flat tire with a bundle of sticks and some hope. So what did these madness-inducing procedures accomplish? Well, they left you with more than just a new smile. Often, it was a fresh batch of infections, severe pain. But fear not. The process came with a silver lining during the recovery phase. Everyone would gather around you, cracking jokes and enjoying a good laugh as you attempted to recover from the oral carnage, while also avoiding comments about your breath, which, trust me, by then, could flay paint off a barn. And just when you thought you were out of the woods, the barber surgeon would return weeks later for his follow-up. Only this time, he wasn't just there for repairs. No, this visit was a social affair, punctuated with health advice that sounded startlingly similar to an introducing my new medical handbook spiel. Picture this. So about those aches, you could try chewing on garlic train wheels, or better yet, a little more ash in your diet. How about that? Oral hygiene education wasn't exactly a strong suit back then. Instead, you got well-meaning, albeit revolting, tips on using burnt bones to brush your teeth. Picture frank discussions about tooth decay alongside steamy cups of ale. The only hydration approved in medieval bars. Yes, folks, your beer belly was literally the only safety net against tooth rot and gastrointestinal despair, or so they believed. At least the beer isn't your mouth's worst enemy, they'd smugly smile. So after enduring the whole circus act of dental care, you could finally stand in front of a mirror with your newfound, albeit slightly bloody smile, and wonder if this was the peak of medieval healthcare. As you gazed at your reflection, perhaps counting the teeth now missing, you'd take solace in one beautiful today, and today only. They'd never ask you to return to the barber surgeon's medieval tent of horrors. In conclusion, whether you walked away with a snow-white smile, missing teeth, or newfound paranoia about twigs, one thing is clear. Dental care in the medieval era was not for the faint of heart. Just be grateful for the advancements in modern dentistry. Remember, there are also no barber surgeons on the television commercials for toothpaste. When tooth decay was inevitable, medieval life eventually morphed into a race for survival. You get to choose, live as nobility and lose your teeth quickly, or remain a peasant with a lingering grunge. Ah, the medieval appeal. Because in this twisted lottery of existence, your dental condition served as a dire reminder of your social standing. Nobles had the luxury of sweets, pastries, and yes, even sugar, but at the peril of their oral health. Picture it, a lavish banquet table, overflowing with sugar-laden treats, rich wines, and all manner of teeth-rotting delights. You could practically hear their molars whimpering in despair from across the hall. Please, not the candied figs again. On the other hand, peasants, with their hearty bread and pottage, might rally around their decayed teeth with a strange sense of pride. I may not have sugar, but at least I'm not a toothless wonder, they'd tell themselves, chewing on a tough chunk of rye as they spit out a long strip of what can only be described as ancient grain, a delightful mix of mould and whatever else had been lingering around. The medieval diet, while sustaining, was brutally unforgiving, and yet for peasants every bite of stale bread served as a reminder that at least they were living life on their own tough terms. But let's not kid ourselves. With every bite of that tireless bread, a tooth fell victim to the clutches of decay. Nobody was safe, not the bustling merchant, not the tired farmer, and definitely not the noble eating their way toward the grave. Toothaches were like medieval weather forecasts, always a chance of cloudy skies, but often chuckled at by whomever hadn't been bitten by the bug just yet. Imagine trying to work the fields or trade in bustling markets while battling a persistent toothache. It truly was a public health crisis waiting to happen. Now consider the fun social aspect. Like a medieval mixer where the most intriguing conversation wouldn't be about local politics or the price of grain, but rather the best way to avoid becoming a toothless mystery. Have you heard? Old Harold up the street lost another one. What's he using now? A bit of twine for support. The more teeth you lost, the more ghost stories you became. Tales of missing molars that would haunt the neighbourhood for decades. Life was further complicated by the stigma surrounding dental issues. The only thing worse than being known as the farmer with a funky smear of porridge on his tunic was being smiled at, like a toothless peasant. Avoiding eye contact became an art form. You could practically hear the wolves howling as a brave noble sauntered past, teeth sparkling under their sun-bathed masks of luxury, but also likely infested with decay of their own. Yet, if you were lucky enough to maintain a few of your pearly whites well into middle age, congratulations, you held a certain celebrity status in your neck of the woods. There goes Margaret, the woman with an intact smile. Let's take her advice. She obviously knows what she's doing. But dear listener, do not be surprised if you find yourself shocked by her oddly aromatic breath. At the end of the day, regardless of their teeth, or lack thereof, people found laughter, community, and resourcefulness. Medieval life may have thrown a few rotten vegetables at its people, but most folk were determined to keep smiling, or at least to grin and bear it through grit, laughter, and a good deal of gallows humour. So, as you drift in thought, conjuring these vivid images of long-lost dental realities, remember this. Whether you chose to munch on the sweets of nobility or gnash your raw grains like a peasant, both paths led to the same destination, a landscape of challenges where maintaining a set of teeth was akin to a wild, unpredictable game of chance. In a world filled with the stark realities of decay, it turns out that having a tooth or two to your name may have been a formidable fortune after all. Just imagine a shiny, seasoned grin amidst the dirt and discomfort, and you might understand why the battle for a decent tooth was less about vanity and more about survival. Now, that's a pretty toothsome tale, wouldn't you say? Let the lessons of the past seep into your dreams as you nod off, hopefully with a full set of teeth to cherish and enjoy for another day. Garlic was more than just a staple spice. It was an accomplice in the oral hygiene saga. So, what was the point? In medieval times, a whiff of garlic could either ward off evil spirits or ultimately keep the ladies at bay. Let's set the scene. It's a bustling market day, and you're surrounded by the intoxicating scents of roasted meats, freshly baked bread, and, oh yes, the pungent aroma of garlic wafting through the air. You're trying to chat up the local beauty while clenching a bulb of garlic like it's the last link to your morning breakfast. Talk about mixed signals. Now, you might think having garlic breath invites instant romance, but medieval dating was less about roses and more about avoiding rogue tooth decay. Picture this: a perfumed noblewoman, clad in layers of fabric which likely hadn't seen the light of day since last fall. She catches a whiff of your garlic-infused smile and thinks, oh no, not him. Because in the medieval world, your mouth was practically an open invitation for folks to judge your wits, charms, and most critically your dental hygiene. Ever tried to flirt with a mouthful of bubbling garlicky paraphrasing? It's like accidentally bringing a party balloon to a funeral. Greetings, fair lady. What brings you to this fine market, you say, only for a gust of garlic breath to jet out like an uninvited fog from a crumbling castle. Suddenly, your earnest inquiry about her favourite turnip soup comes off less like a sweet compliment and more like an ancient battle cry. Whoever thought garlic was good for romance definitely never faced the consequences of afternoon breath. So, what did our ancestors do in response? Instead of reaching for mints or mouthwash, they leaned into it, crafting a bizarre logic that might make you question your life choices. They believed that garlic, in all its smelly glory, had magical properties. It was said to repel vampires, evil spirits, and quite frankly anyone with a keen sense of smell. Throughout history, garlic had more titles than most lords, often being hailed as a health booster that could cure ailments, fateful curses, and, of course, give a little zing to your brewing cup of misery. But let's take a moment to appreciate the unfortunate soul who decided to hitch a shoe to the garlic horse. Picture this. You've polished your best tunic, buttered up your finest leather shoes, and you're ready for an evening of feasting. But your side dish, a massive pile of roasted garlic. Sure, it's delightful and aromatic, at least for the 5 seconds it takes you to cram it down your gullet. But come morning, you're waking up feeling like you've made friends with a whole garlic plant in your mouth, with every breath feeling like you just chowed down on memories of stinking fields. And let's not forget how the process of consuming garlic was not for the faint-hearted. Ever tried mincing garlic by hand? You might as well sign yourself up for a round of medieval thumb wrestling, because the chances of getting it everywhere are high. By the time you finish, you're left with sticky fingers, which you better wash off before greeting your neighbours. Oh, and washing didn't mean running water in your hovel, which might resemble a swamp. So you're left thinking, did I just flavour my skin, or am I crafting a potion for impending doom? But as the sun sets, with its final rays sneaking behind the jagged rooftops, and the pleasant smell of boiling stew drifting in the air, men and women still looked forward to those evening gatherings. There they would find camaraderie and potentially more, despite the overpowering scent of garlic swirling through the air, hanging like a persistent ghost refusing to be exorcised. A little garlic couldn't ruin a good time, could it? Alas, the first few gulps of ale would cloak the unfortunate truth behind garlic breath. As your laughter and joy permeated through the crowd, hopes spring eternal that everyone might actually think, "Ah, delightful garlic essence." Spoiler alert, they did not. So, as you leave the evening filled with laughter and culinary delights, just remember the medieval motto, "What's a little garlic among friends?" Well, maybe you'll find out. Just don't ask the noble woman beside you how she really feels. In the grand tale of medieval hygiene, garlic reigned supreme. It taught people resilience, or rather, how to disguise the smell of daily existence with a side of regret. Garlic might have been king in the kitchen, but in the realm of romance, well, let's just say that sometimes love really does stink. Forget modern orthodontists. Locals had a remedy for everything, combining folklore and terrible wisdom into the heating pot of oral hygiene. You could either end up with a minty experience or the anecdote that led to your demise. Imagine a local healer, a charming but perpetually confused sort, armed with herbs, roots, and an endless supply of misplaced confidence. If you had a toothache, your options were to either visit him or resort to your mother's blunt advice about just hustling through it. Either way, relief seemed perpetually out of reach, yet locals turned to these practitioners because, well, what choice did they have? In the corner of every mud-floored hut stood a makeshift apothecary, stocked with potions guaranteed to leave you in worse shape. Want to clean your teeth? How about a delightful concoction of garlic, crushed twigs, and a healthy sprinkle of mould from the refrigerator? I mean the pantry. Sounds gourmet, right? These folks would blend their most inventive and questionable medicinal ideas as if they were creating modern food fusion. The fact that you might still have an extraction appointment in the morning seemed like a small price to pay for a little health magic. Local healers boasted an impressive variety of dental tricks to offer. First up, could we interest you in some lovingly roasted garlic cloves? Not only would they help with tooth decay, but also set you up for an oh-so-charming social life. Who needed halitosis when every gathering could double as a garlic appreciation society? With breath that could probably kill a medium-sized mammal, chatting with your neighbours suddenly became a thrilling edge-of-your-seat experience. Just imagine your best friend turning a pale shade of green as you shared war stories of what happened down that fateful road to rot. Delightful. Don't forget about the superstitions. If your tooth was giving you a particular jolt of pain, they might have you holding your breath while reciting specific phrases, believed to summon good vibes and repel evil spirits. Tooth fairy. Meet cavity demon. One round of incantation later, you'd be left to grapple with delusions that your tooth was slowly repenting for its sins. Who knew oral care could take a spiritual plunge? But if your pain persisted, fear not. The healer would have a foolproof solution. Leeches. Yes, leeches. In an attempt to balance your humours, they'd stick these little blood-sucking fiends onto your gums. Ever tried explaining that treatment to your approving mother? Well, darling, that's just how they did it back then. Now watch your blood pressure. By the time they're done slapping leeches on your mouth, you're not quite sure if you're in a spa appointment or the set of a horror film. From roots to worms, laughter met with absurd disbelief. Occasionally you'd stumble upon someone who swore that whispered incantations over a frog would heal your aching smile. But first you had to find said amphibian. Were they actually healing teeth or just giving them up for lost? A mere adventure. You pondered the metaphysical implications while going home to chew on your own ragged tooth. In hindsight, wisdom might have been better served by a trip to a competent librarian, instead of a healer with a penchant for showmanship. But as horrible as it may sound, these grassroots methods reflected an ingenious connection of humanity with nature. Who needs a chemistry degree when you've got a potato, a sprig of rosemary, and a tall tale about how your great-uncle cured the village one tooth at a time? Being able to escape from the reality of tooth trouble while indulging in imaginative folklore gave locals a sense of hope, one that was arguably more gut-wrenching and rewarding than peer-reviewed practices we stick to today. Ultimately, these trusted local healers were much more than simply dental troubleshooters. They were the town's blend of doctors, philosophers and entertainers, an intricate dance of herbs and humour, often resulting in either mild relief or a reason to grab a stick of something pokeable. And while many of their concoctions might have been questionable at best, there was a glimmer of truth in the laughter we now share over medieval dental care horror stories. History may be grimy, but it retains a glimmer of grit, humour, and in some cases downright hilarity. So before you stick your toothbrush in your mouth tomorrow morning, take a moment to appreciate modern dentistry, not just for its whitening strips and minty flavours, but for the centuries of experimentation, pain, and comedy that ultimately led to someone finally taking the guessing game out of dental hygiene. When your mouth takes priority during a rat invasion, we'd argue about the level of oral care left to chance. What do you do when your defences are down? Fight for your teeth or save the bread? In the murky depths of medieval life, the answer was often both, or neither, depending on how quick you are on your feet, or, let's be honest, how fast your neighbour's chickens could warn you. As you assess the current state of your dental hygiene, you're simultaneously navigating the intricate dance of survival amidst unsanitary living conditions that make a hog pen look posh. Picture this. It was a Sunday morning, and both you and the family goat were eyeing that last hunk of bread as though it were a golden nugget from the gods. But alas, those familiar scurrying sounds echoed across your thatch-roofed abode with the determination of an invading army. A family of rats had laid siege to your cherished last meal. You'd think that your priorities lie with setting traps or devising a plan with the family dog, yet there you are, staring down the path of decay left gaping by your molars, while simultaneously trying to protect your precious breakfast. In medieval towns, where congestion and limited hygiene were the norm, a rat sighting was more than just a nuisance. It was an omen, precisely what you didn't want to see when there were few other comforts. What's aggrieved your neighbours worse than a toothache? The creeping dread of rat droppings in your living space. These critters didn't just threaten your food, but also brought forth a buffet of germs and unwelcome diseases. You might be battling plaque, but the rats were gearing up to wage war on your immune system. As you engage in a potential chess match with your food's furry usurpers, let's take a moment to examine what exactly was happening in that mouth of yours. Picture the historical scene. Toothbathing didn't quite exist, but hey, at least you were keeping the rats at bay, right? So, as you gnawed on that tough bread from last month, part rock, part kernel of hope, you're greeted by an excruciating crunching sound. What's that? Oh no, you just ground down on some chicken bones left behind as protein-packed make-believe nourishment. And now, your dental contributions to history include both a busted tooth and an invitation for necrotizing gingivitis. Perhaps instead of continuing to rummage for the remaining pieces of your half-lost bag of flour, your mind started wandering. What if that middle-aged charlatan at the market had a more effective remedy? Have the town barber surgeons developed a secret potion to thwart tooth decay? Or should you just stick with mashed roots? Both might prove equally useful in managing bodily disruptions. Speaking of interruptions, the dilemma of rats could lead to ungraceful entrances to social interactions. Imagine attending a village gathering, proud and toothless, only to realise your oral presentation has attracted a curious rat. Nothing like hoping to impress the local baron with tales of valour when you've involuntarily fed a rodent from across the way. As if medieval hygiene was not embarrassing enough, your lack of dental finesse also silently signalled who might be next in line for disease. It's not all doom and gloom, though. Here's a fun medieval twist. They believed some familiar faces roamed at night in search of tooth sacrifices. Yes, you heard it right. The Tooth Fairy. Only she didn't quite fly in on a cute little winged chariot. She was more of an unkempt alley dweller, luring you in under the guise of health. Picture this. If you left a tooth under your straw mattress, it would be magically replaced with something equally mystifying. A small pittance of gossip that wouldn't even buy you a single pint of ale. As the nights rolled back into the daylight, those quick-to-gather rats often offered the only etiquette you could count on. When they eventually left a footprint in your now toothless setting, it indicated they had devoured what little dental wisdom you sought to hold on to. This had become the new social practice, a polite acknowledgement that not only were your teeth gone, but now you had a rendezvous with the biggest health concerns worth chuckling about at the local tavern. Medieval life was as much about ignoring realities and forging ahead as it was about recoiling from rodents. So when the next batch of calamities hits, a toothache, an invasion of critters, or a scuffle over a piece of bread, make sure you pack a little extra patience. After all, if you're not fighting off dental threats, you might as well have a good laugh over how cute the rodents' petty thefts are becoming. Welcome to medieval mouth mayhem, where your next dental dilemma doubles as the newest drama unfolding amidst the local rat races. Medieval times made pasta lovers grimace when they understood how hard those carbs could hit your teeth. When the carbs shine bright, decay gnaws in the background, regretting dinner decisions. Anyone. Picture a rustic table set with hearty loaves of bread so hard they could double as weapons. It wasn't rare to slice through a loaf, after negotiating with it for a solid 5 minutes, and find you've chipped a tooth within a pitiful flick of the wrist. Eating was as dance with despair, with every grain of coarse rye reminding you that the only thing worse than hunger was biting into a rock disguised as bread. Ah, bread, the medieval staple that was the joy of the table and the terror of the dentist's dark uncleaned tools. Whether presented with a hunk of bread gallantly slathered with a grimy rag, or offered the opportunity to gnash on a sweet pasty made of sawdust and questionable meat, your only choice was to dive into the experience like Lady Macbeth into guilt. But, let's be honest, how thrilling is it to risk life and limb with every gorge you take? You could practically hear your teeth scream, "Why do we have to be subject to this carbohydrate tyranny?" Let's talk about porridge, a culinary masterpiece so bland and gritty it would leave even the most adventurous eater questioning their life choices. This thick sludge was often made with whatever grains were on hand. And when I say whatever, I mean it. Forget the pumpkin spice lattes. Imagine feasting on something that had been simmering in the same pot since last harvest. Each bowl was an ongoing edible experiment. They took whatever they could scrounge, mixed it in, served it up, and prayed for the best. Not exactly a Michelin star meal, but a step above starving. And what's the accompanying beverage, you ask? Why, weak ale, of course. It's not so much to wash it down as it is to make life even more confusing. Imagine starting your day with a frosty mug of beer before tackling a field of crops, while praying no one notices the lack of teeth. It's like going to brunch and deciding the best pairing for your dry toast is a mimosa. But unfortunately, your mimosa is just an opaque brew of yesterday's fermentation. It might have originally contained fruit, but these days, who knows? And then there are potatoes. Oh yes, the deep-fried delights we adore today were essentially non-existent. They were a newfangled European import around the late medieval period, and as luck would have it, no one really knew how to cook them. So, the humble spud arrived grinning on the scene with a reputation for filling bellies, but an uncertain status within the socio-political realignment of grumpy nobles. Are they edible, or meant for pest control, was the burning question of the day. Spoiler alert, they didn't hold up well under the bite. So, where were we? Ah yes, working hard to keep our medieval homes running while having a dental war zone in our mouths. Life as a peasant was effectively a series of carb-crammed meals, with the unsettling knowledge that every bite could lead to a dental disaster. Coupled with the constant danger of being crushed by a building caught in a civil dispute, or falling poorly stacked hay bales, modern dental life feels like a pampered dream vacation. Dinner time turned into a competition of survival. You attempted to chew, swallow and pray. You didn't simply break your jaw on what was labelled dinner. You might question your dietary habits and wonder why your mouth resembles the aftermath of a medieval siege, filled with the remnants of unyielding carbs. And if, by chance, you managed to chew your way through an actual feast, chances were the nobles' leftovers were more appealing. They might enjoy marinated turnips like royalty while you scooped a ladle of soupy porridge that had just seen a rat stroll through. But never fear. Nourishing feels more exciting when you're knee-deep in a culinary cycle of decay. In the end, every hearty meal participated in creating a smorgasbord of silent cringe, a lament over the misunderstandings of medieval diets. So, onwards we trundle, from soggy bread to brew that might knock you out cold, death in every meal imaginable. Life might have been a toothy challenge, but at least you could smile through it. After all, it was all in the name of carbs, or, well, what was left of them. Get ready for a quirky festival when losing teeth meant celebration rather than condolence. Dancers shook their fragmented beliefs surrounding dental care, and village musicians strummed cheerful tunes while people gathered to honour what was often their least favourite subject, teeth. Riddles and laughter pushed forward, and while today's tooth fairy might be a whimsical, fairy-sized entity, in medieval times the concept took on quite a different form, more like a tooth-themed carnival filled with questionable morals and dubious rituals. Picture this. As the sun sets over a quaint village, the air thick with the scent of festivity and possibly some questionable hygiene, villagers lined the cobblestone streets, sharing tales of heroic dental feats, like that time Igor pulled out his own rotten molar with nothing but a rope, a crowbar, and a week's worth of beer. Cheers erupted, and community members elbowed each other with a mix of excitement and disbelief. "Can't top that one," they would chuckle, a reminder of how dental misfortune somehow morphed into local legend. Tooth loss wasn't just the end of a dental journey, it was the start of a boastful story, a rite of passage wrapped in laughter, and let's not forget the actual tooth disposal. Rather than cozying up to the idea of sneaking a tooth under a pillow for monetary gain, medieval children held onto their lost teeth for luck or tossed them out into the fields as offerings. "Oh, land spirits, please grant me bountiful harvests." It was like tossing a coin in a wishing well, with a premise as outlandish as putting a lost tooth on the windowsill hoping to magic up gold. And if the tooth happened to tumble under the nether regions of a far too comfortable goat, well, that was just a chance the child had to take. During festivals, the glee reached doses of ridiculous proportions. Villagers donned costumes of exaggerated mouth-sized tooth figures, spinning around the square like toddler tornadoes. Some brave souls crafted makeshift tooth-shaped floats that brought together the community, while others competed to see who could balance a basket of real, but mostly rotten teeth on their heads for the longest duration. Winning the competition meant not just eternal glory, but also being crowned Tooth King or Queen for the weekend. What a title to brag about over the neighbour's backyard fence. As laughter echoed through the village and rambunctious festivities unfolded, people began to regard dental loss as more than just a nuisance. It became a time to embrace the quirks of their existence, the reality of their smiles, decayed and otherwise. They even made up silly songs about tooth care, most of which sounded like songs composed by a drunken bard on a particularly long night of celebrating tooth loss. Oh, teeth are best when trimmed and spruced, but if you lose one, you're still introduced. Who thought dental care could spark such creativity? But the cleaning rituals post-festival were a reality check. As dawn broke and the hangovers crept in, with remnants of last night's merriment still clinging to their breath, people reluctantly regrouped to discuss their grainy, cavity-ridden realities. Toothaches didn't magically vanish overnight despite the jubilant parades, and the local barber surgeons certainly had their work cut out for them come morning. It was a sobering realization, wrapping that proverbial fun in a rather gritty bow. As laughter faded and normalcy returned, reflections from the previous night's festival lent themselves to the practicalities of dental care, accompanied by tales of unfortunate run-ins with untreated cavities. The sobering tales transformed into new promise, a rallying cry to stop neglecting those stubborn teeth before they turned into stories worth telling rather than reasons to cringe. In their quest for a future with fewer dental mishaps, villagers planned further festivals, incorporating some dramatic flair and absurdity, effectively kicking off the dance of the solitary tooth. This helped them embrace their shared horrors while sending them forth with better hygiene, inspired by eccentricity and flamboyant celebrations rather than fear. After all, laughter is mere sugar-coating, a sweet reminder to cherish our smiles, even if they are just as unpredictable as the tooth they lost. So there you have it, a quirky medieval festival designed to celebrate lost teeth rather than mourn them, replete with laughter, quirky traditions, and comedic twists on tooth care. For all its tales of decay, it served as the bright spot in a sometimes dark world, proving that even in discomfort the human spirit can still find a way to dance. Cheers to medieval wisdom where drinking beer instead of water seemed like common sense with a side of tooth decay. If your water had parasites, who were you to argue with a less tainted brew? The logic was clear. When faced with murky streams likely teeming with all manner of microscopic monsters, your best bet was to simply grab a mug of beer instead. After all, beer was effectively classified as a food group back then, essentially the breakfast of champions. With the average medieval breakfast not including juice or even coffee, thankfully no existential crises over caffeine cravings at dawn, weak ale became the go-to refreshment to start the day. Why conquer your morning with clean water when a pint of beer could wash it down? Imagine strolling through the village at sunrise, witnessing rows of peasants, all clutching wooden mugs brimming with that morning brew rather than a healthy glass of water. Their faces, grimy from the nightly foraging, challenge you with a question. Why would I gamble with water when this beauty right here is brewed by the finest local craftsman? That fine craftsmanship, however, may have included anything from stale bread to the remnants of last week's hop harvest, not to mention the rat that just strutted off with a small bread sample on its back. It's like the medieval version of a craft beer, where the ingredients are a delightful surprise more whimsical than wholesome. The irony didn't end there. The alcohol content, although low by today's standards, still gave their bushy moustaches a distinct frothy flair. while simultaneously ensuring a fair number of medieval folk were tipsy well before noon. Nothing says productivity quite like feeling warm in the stomach while attempting to plough the fields or haggle over turnips. The hangover the next day? Well, who cared when you had endless work, insignificant sleep, and one or two herbal remedies to remedy those fleeting head pains? Work hard, drink harder. And let's not overlook the children. Yes, the children. Medieval toddlers drank small beer. That's right. Instead of fruit juices or milkshakes, kids got weaker versions of ale starting at a young age, with parents reasoning that at least their tiny livers would get a little workout too. When half your village might fall prey to the perilous lurking dangers of tainted drinking water, bread soaked in beer became a rite of passage. In fact, it fostered a kind of bonding moment, similar to how parents today might share family recipes or hop ancient tales about legendary craft brews. Now, modern historians have noted that while the wastelands of filth swirled around them, they often missed out on one crucial element to their otherwise if you can't beat them, join them mentality: fresh vegetables. Yes, the ill-fated peasants struggled against the elements of carbohydrate pooling in their daily gruel, but they also struggled against ignorance. The teeth of many a villager were outmatched by the resounding flavour of fermentation. With each sip of that murky marvel, their dental realities took centre stage, gradually regressing as tooth decay became a rite of passage even before adulthood. Those decayed-out smiles led to some very interesting interactions in courtship, wouldn't you say? Social etiquette in medieval Europe meant you didn't strike up a conversation without gauging your partner's breath situation from 10 paces, and yet romance bloomed. Peasants got together for merry gatherings over goblets, with those sparkling beverages, conversations crowning themselves in laughter. Somewhere mixing in congealed fears of fermentation, it became commonplace to approach love cautiously while praying your fellow suitor hadn't guzzled down too many helping of ale. Moreover, if they were fortunate enough to marry into wealth, perhaps they could sidestep the lack of hygiene and just blame bad breath on the mouthing of status. "Oh, my sweet betrothed, the smell doesn't offend me. It is the purity of the ancient ales that bind us in eternal matrimony." Surprisingly, if you managed to keep your heirloom charm of cracked teeth a secret, love had a sneaky way of flourishing. So there you have it, a world where the refreshing choice between ale and water inadvertently fueled both social interactions and catastrophic dental lawlessness. Beer became the unflappable solution to centuries-old problems, transforming the gritty life of medieval folk into a bizarre dance of camaraderie, creativity and cravings for crumbs crusted with history. Ultimately, while modern man might recoil from the idea of thriving on something so unbalanced, medieval folk purportedly raised their mugs in triumph, even if the price they paid included extra trips to the dentist, backed with a generous dose of despair. Because if you were going down, you might as well enjoy every frothy sip along the way. Conversations back then weren't as friendly when tooth decay made the rounds. Sharing stories became a trial of social grace with infected tooth dilemmas. Just imagine enduring an hour of toothy awkwardness at a gathering is like trying to have a deep conversation with someone chewing on gravel. The medieval social scene could swiftly turn from joyous laughter to collective horror at the whiff of fetid breath lingering in the air like an unwelcome grey cloud. Wandering into a local tavern, you're immediately greeted by a cacophony of laughter, combined with the scent of stale ale and unwashed bodies. The tavern is packed with your fellow peasants, all of whom have quite the dental dilemma. As the tankards clank together in boisterous camaraderie, you realise that while the songs may be merry, the collective oral hygiene, not so much. Every slurred laugh could be silently gasping for a dental intervention. Truly, it's a miracle that no one has spontaneously combusted from embarrassment yet, Speaking of merriment, let's not forget the cheerful practice of storytelling. In a time before Netflix and Prime, most social entertainment revolved around campfire banter or tavern tales. Picture this: a merry fellow leaning over to regale you with a dark medieval fable, full of charm, ambience, and a big old smile that has something decaying in the back. You nod politely, desperately holding your breath, hoping against hope that the tales are truly enthralling enough to distract from the distinct aroma of decay and the very real danger of airborne particles. "Did you hear about the knight who fought a dragon?" he starts, teeth proudly showcasing the remnants of last week's pottage, and you realise you'd rather face that dragon right now than stay locked in this dental hostage situation. It's like he's committed to the role of a fearsome cavalier, while simultaneously presenting the evidence of a sugar-laden existence that's turned his mouth into a medieval horror scene. Mechanical apologies for his breath become an expected part of life. It's basically living with a permanent breath mint shortage. Everyone's trying to mask their experiences while dying to talk about the latest village gossip. Here, conversations involve battling the overwhelming urge to lose oneself in thoughts like, will the doctor help me, or will he just double as my barber? Certainly forgetting your place within the social circle while grappling with active toothaches is not a genuine option. And let's not overlook the subsequent trips to the barber surgeon, where the tone inevitably shifts from cheery banter to painful reality. After all, tooth extractions were often executed less like delicate surgery, and more like an industrial process involving an untrained amateur. As you cling to the edges of your rickety chair, your dental dilemma takes centre stage, ensuring that casual conversation morphs into a collective medley of "what's that sound? Is he really going to pull that out?" And "do we have to listen to this?" So you're forced to weigh each sip of beer with the potential threat ahead. Do you smile and risk opening the floodgates to the consequences of your neglected dental health? Or do you clench your mouth shut and smile enigmatically, like a cryptic medieval sphinx, leaving others to puzzle over your bad breath? The elegant dance of socializing becomes a nightly competition against grotesque realities, and your jaw is aching from grimacing at your friends while trying to suppress your own trauma. To combat the cringe, every medieval socialite had their tricks up their sleeves. Chewing on parsley or mint leaves during gatherings was a popular ruse. However, nothing could truly disguise the stench of rotting teeth, which played an amusing round of tag with the rural population's collective paranoia. "What's that whiff?" your neighbour would ask, glancing about as one would in search of a lost sheep. Meanwhile, you're left measuring the levels of your own shame and considering a future diploma from the Academy of Awkward Conversations. In fact, there's a fair bet the term "eating your words" came to life amidst these social circles, as people would struggle to find the right balance between snacking and surviving as the tension of personal hygiene loomed over every exchange. Little did they know that the worst offensive was right there, nestled among their friends, rife with bad breath and questionable tooth care. And as the evening devolves into side-splitting laughter and embarrassing retorts, you realise one undeniable truth. Having a fun time amidst dental disasters is the medieval equivalent of community bonding. It might not be favourable to the teeth, but the stories shared and the collective awkwardness could certainly solidify friendships stronger than any dental implant ever could. So, the next time you consider brushing off your last dinner party because of a lack of conversation skills, just remember this. Even in the darkest of dental times, society managed to connect, rotten breath and all. If the medieval world taught us anything, it's that a shared cavity, or five, could indeed spark a fantastically tutored social comedy. Everyone knows that death is promised. Still, medieval life came with amusing, albeit grim, realities. You might die before reaching the age of 30, leaving behind not just a memory, but quite a collection of unfortunate dental decisions. Picture your friends and neighbours spontaneously gathering around the latest deceased to gossip as much as to mourn, eyes glinting at the potential of some juicy stories. Death in the Middle Ages was less of a solemn affair and more a social event with the enthusiasm of your third-grade birthday party, except everyone's breath could peel paint. So, what about those funerals? Prepare yourself for a peculiar celebration of life, where the deceased's toothy imperfections could actually inspire humour, not horror. After all, why mourn the inevitable when you could chuckle about the marshmallowy decay that likely took them out? The late lamented might have left behind a set of teeth that were more of a horror story than a smile. And if you thought they were doomed in life, the afterlife would just be a continuation of dental chaos. You know the drill. Your late friend Harold had a bad habit of refusing that homemade toothpaste made from wood ash and crushed herbs. Rest assured his smile would have looked like that of a medieval pumpkin. Yet there he was, the life of the party, even in death. If anyone could giggle over the idea of Harold being buried with a mouthful of something reminiscent of cottage cheese, it was the villagers left urban legends and snickering anecdotes. Think of it. Did you see Harold? Why did they leave a block of cheese as his last meal? Another thing that gives us chuckles in retrospect is the art of burial. Medieval practice often involved tossing the body in a wooden box and believing it was a luxury worthy of the wealthier deceased. Sure, body size played a role, but have you ever tried selecting the smallest possible coffin for a person with tooth decay? Imagine the visual disaster. No amount of fabric woven from fine gold could distract from the rigged grimness of mismatched dental aesthetics. But by medieval standards, extravagance was truly in the eye of the beholder. As you observed the hasty graveside gatherings, neighbours would huddle close, likely fumigating the area by munching on garlic pieces, wary of both spirits and bad breath. While candlelight flickered sweetly, lending itself to unflattering angles and murky reflections, some gentler souls might whisper, "Do we want the toothless or the worm-gnawed old gentleman today?" Funerals were functionally fabulous, leaning on charm and sometimes odour to keep the memories alive. Then there were the issues of hygiene, or lack thereof. The dead may not have had a curse intended for them, but the rotting teeth could become a laughingstock that dared to invite ridicule. Sparkling white teeth? A highfalutin fantasy! The great tooth disaster left behind meant your friends and strangers would either express animated grief or erupt into gossip about your last 32 toothpaste-dodging inconsistencies. Imagine listening to your grandmother telling chummy tales of your ancestor Harold, who once mistook a rotten potato for a tooth and clung to it like a pesky critter. Even the clergy had their share of bizarre experiences. When burying a questionable body, they often wondered aloud whether the departed could rise from the grave, bargaining on their holiness. And what about the obligatory remarks from priests regarding their lack of dental savagery? Volumes could be written on the theological gymnastics of bad breath, in terms of afterlife access as the coffin was lowered into the earth. Shouldn't they freshly brush before facing the larger judgment? In the end, while their teeth might not have shone bright, the real legacy left behind was laughter mingling with the scent of decay, a piquant reminder of how sweet dark humour was. So, when you tuck into your comfortable bed tonight, whisper a sweet thank you not just for toothpaste, but for humour and the unpretentiousness of your ancestors, whose smiles were often the punchline to history's great joke,